Hello, and thanks for joining us. This is Standpoint. I am Precious Amai. Today, we're just going to delve into one of the major stories in the country this week. For many years, the southeast region in the country was considered the safest geopolitical zone in Nigeria. It was, for instance, in its 2019 report, Nigeria Mons said the southeast recorded the least number of reported killings with 94 deaths, while the southwest recorded 157 deaths, followed by south-south with 341 deaths. North Central recorded 469 deaths, and the northeast had 1,009, while northwest had the highest with 1,118 deaths. That's in 2019. But the spate of violence in that region recently has risen, and that's with renewed secessionist agitations, which have turned radical and violent, as well as the government's countermeasures, which also stirred controversy. Security in that region has basically deteriorated. We've seen situations where governors will ask civil servants and civil servants to return to work and traders to return to the market. But, the sit-at-home order will be enforced by those who want it to be enforced. And those are the issues we're looking at today, because recently there have been calls for Nnamdi Kanu to be released, as that is the only way to bring stability back to the region, according to those who are calling for his release. And then, you also have those who are trying to, again, enforce. We had recent attempts by some individuals to enforce, the sit-at-home order in Enugu and in Ebonyi. That was quickly, nipped in the bud by security operatives. But let's bring in our guest. We have the security, or rather the special advisor on media and publicity to Abia State Governor. He's Ferdinand Ekioma. He joins us via Zoom. We also have Imisim Willie, a security expert, who also joins us via Zoom. Good to have both of you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
You're welcome.
Let me start with you, Mr. Ekioma. We've seen recent calls or recent attempts to enforce at least a one-week sit-at-home order in the southeast, especially in Ebonyi and Enugu. That has been nipped in the bud by security operatives. But you are in Abia State. What can you tell us about the recent state of security in the southeast?
Thank you once again. I think the challenge we are having here it still revolves around kidnapping, mainly kidnapping and armed robbery and the rest of them. The secessionist agitation here seems to be going down, because shortly on assumption of office, this government, the government of Dr. Alex Otti, has already started the process. Even though we are not making noise about it, we are not publicizing it. We've started the process of trying to engage our youth, trying to initiate policies and programs that would help them some of these agitations. Because whichever way you look at it, these problems revolve around unemployment, poor governance, disconnection between the government and the governed. And when you see youths are not employed, they are not properly engaged, government is not ready to carry them along in its programs and policies, there are chances that some of these agitations will come up. So it has always been the position of Dr. Alex Otti, even before he became the governor, that the foundation of the agitation in the southeast is traceable to poor governance. And that is why our position is first initiate policies and programs that would help convince the youth that the government is serious, about providing job opportunities for the youth. That's all. We are definitely going to sit down with the youth, the people, especially the leadership of these groups that are agitating, to interact with them, convince them on the plans and programs of the government, and remind them of the need for us to have a peaceful environment in the southeast. Because whichever way you look at it, the agitation will not do anybody any good in any way, whichever way you look at it. So our position, we are applying wisdom. We wouldn't want to behave like those in the military, or begin to threaten, begin to warn the youth, begin to issue directives and orders, or begin to mobilize security to quell these agitations. It's usually not the best way to go. We were all here in Nigeria, and we saw what late President Umaru Yar'Adua did we saw what he did and we saw the impact. So what stops us from coming up with the same strategy to ensure
I will
that
get to the strategy
there
in
is
just a
peace?
moment, Mr. Ikema, but I want to ask you because you have linked somehow this agitation to unemployment and to poor governance. But I want to ask because a lot of people would say, look, is the marginalization, a lot of people have thought it was, the idea that the Southeast has always felt marginalized by, government at the center. Now, is it unemployment that is leading to this agitation? Or that, those who are unemployed are taking advantage, of this agitation?
When you have, I wouldn't want to use, okay, yeah, let me say, I'm not referring to any particular government, but when you have an irresponsible government, then you begin to see non-state actors cash into the opportunities created by that disconnection, that lack of good governance, that lack of responsibility on the side of the government. You see non-state actors begin to take advantage of it. It doesn't matter whether it's marginalization. There is external and internal. You have external and internal marginalizations. You have it. So sometimes people will tell you, yes, the federal government is saying, yes, we know that to an extent our people are marginalized. But then there is also internal marginalization from home. So we don't waste our time blaming external forces without looking at those at home who are also responsible for the marginalization. So whichever you look at it, marginalization is part of bad governance. That's an aspect of bad governance. When you come up with policies and programs that do not protect the interests and welfare and well-being of all citizens, when you come up with policies that are lopsided, that's just the marginalization you're talking about. But whichever way you look at it, it's poor governance, it's bad governance. And that is why we are ready, the government here is ready to sit down with these people, to sit down with the authorities, those who are accused of being responsible for this marginalization, because we must first and foremost show our own example. If we begin to get it right at home, our people will not bother themselves talking about what is happening externally, because every month we receive our allocation, and if we apply that principles of frugality and responsibility in the governance of our state, we'll be able to utilize whatever we are generating internally to also take care of our people. So this government is not ready to indulge in unnecessary bulk passing. We are being marginalized, or this. No. We're not interested in that, because we are now in power and we have a responsibility of convincing our people that we are capable of, serving them. We will not spend our time maybe accusing the federal government or accusing. We will only engage people in diplomacy, engage in dialogue, interact with those in charge of different, ministries, agencies, and parastatals, and all of them in charge with the governance of the country at the federal level, and say, this is what our people need. Sometimes you solve these problems through dialogue, not necessarily through unnecessary confrontations or complaint or, verbal attacks and all the rest of them. We are not interested in going that direction, because the person presiding over the affairs of the state here is a responsible citizen, and he understands what governance is all about.
Mr. Ikem, I just wanted to establish, what the real challenge is, because you live there. You understand better than anyone who is watching from outside what the issue is. So now that we've established that, let me bring in the security analyst, Mr. Willie, into the conversation. Mr. Willie, I mean, you have, as a security expert, I know that you have been monitoring security situation across the country and how they are developing. Because when you look at the Southeast, and for anyone who has lived there, you will know that it's been one of the, basically for many decades, really very quiet and calm, one of the safest regions in the country. At what point did the Southeast degenerate to this, security in the Southeast degenerate to this level? Where did authorities miss it?
Good afternoon once again, and thank you very much for having me here on the program. Right now in the Southeast, all is not well. Everybody is afraid. Even apart from the common man, unfortunate aspect of it is that even the government agencies that we have in place are afraid. They are living in fear. Because if you look at even the police posts and even their police divisions, many of these places are not in place. And so every individual is running for his own life. So you can now see how serious the situation is now. that the common man cannot protect is not safe, and even the government agencies that are supposed to do the needful to protect the masses, so they are also running for their lives. There's a statement you made here. Let me draw your attention to the particular zone we are talking about here. Southeast is the smallest zone in the country, but it contributes greatly towards Nigerian economic growth, oil and natural gas reserves, along with growing industrialized economy. Then, in the region, it has a population of 36 million people, approximately, like let's say 18% of the total population of this country. As of May this year, the Ebonyi state, which is one of the 5 states that make up the
Southeast region
zone, this region. You know what happened? That it was rated to be top 5 in the list of the poorest states in the country, with the poverty rate that is hitting 79.76%. You can now see what is happening. Now, for many years, southeast of Nigeria was considered the safest geographical zones in the country. How did this happen that kidnapping, violence, crime, intercommunal trade by terrorist groups, and many others have become the day? Let me remind you that I watched through the scene of events. I could see what is happening in Anambra. I could see what is happening in Enugu, Abakaliki, and so on and so forth. Many factors actually have contributed to these unsafe situations in the zone. Yes, and above all is about a crisis or insurgency in the southeast that was once called Olo crisis, that was generated when the military, that is Nigerian armies, went to crush the paramilitary wing of indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, the Eastern Security Network. And many other unsafe situations have come to play. Now, what are the implications of this? Business-wise, see, there's no business in the environment. People cannot do business to survive. And what about the lives of people? People's lives are lost every day in hundreds of thousands. And what about development? Like, it is always defined about the meaning of security, that it means development, it means growth, it means creations of wealth. These have been retarded. Mm-hmm. So it means that governments are lost grip of some certain factors or conditions. You should grab and take hold of them. What are some of these things? The mentality that crisis shouldn't take place in a particular environment zone should be out of place, because crises are natural. Just like we do say that the teeth and the tongue are in the same place, but you see, the teeth will master the emotional makeup of the tongue, and the 2 of them are still in the same place. So what this means is this, that the state government was supposed to sit down and think about what actually is happening. They should separate politics from the reality. Because when you mix up politics and the reality on ground, you can't get it. Because in some cases, politics will be ahead of it, and you will play to the zero.
Right. Just a minute, Mr. Willie. I am still on you. But when you talk about government separating politics from security and focusing really on the issue on ground, whose responsibility was it to address this particular issue? Because we know that security is still very much at the doorstep of the federal government. But there's also that saying that all politics is local, and so perhaps maybe the Southeast governors should have done more to address it. But whose responsibility is it to address, or was it at that time, before it degenerated to this level, to address it?
In a natural setting, it's assumed that a father is responsible for the crisis in his family. So in the primary condition or right as to who is supposed to take care of the safety of a nation or a particular zone rests with the government, in quote, with the state government and that of the federal government. And where this fail, we see the case of Northwest zone, that the locals, they come together and they say, okay, let's do like this. They create a platform to fight insurgency. But what happens? The state government came in and then brought in some other strategies, and then they scattered that of the locals. And you see what is happening now. Go to that environment and see what is happening. That the state government actually has the sole right to see to it that the safety of lives and properties of individual or the masses is a key factor of its operations, of governance. So where this fail, yes, we now come and say, okay, that the indigents, the locals will come up with certain ideas. Because like now, when we talk about living a level of accountability, each father should be able to know the movement of his son. Where did you go to? And when this thing is happening that you don't know what your son, where he went to, report to the police so that the son will be tamed, will be talked to. And then we also have local chiefs, elders, who should be interested in what is happening in the local or in the communities. These are the people that will call for meetings and then see to it that they bring solutions, bring ideas on the way forward. And then, like my co-speaker on this subject made mention of, when these locals come up with ideas, government should key into it. And then, because when government key into it, they will call for meetings. And then they discuss with these people. What government does is that it should be a calming agent by listening to the suggestions of these locals. And then when these ones bring the ideas, they support the ideas. That is one. Another area is about the hands of government. Let's take, for instance, the police force in place. Does the government of the day support the police or what they are doing? Look at the challenges that police have to face. And then these challenges they face, how are they equipped to face these challenges? So you see, when government fails in these areas, they will leave these ones with bare hands to face the challenges. And we see that we can't get it right.
All right, so I want to take on, so sorry to jump in. I want to, because you raised 2 points, and I want to bring in Mr. Ikeoba to respond to those 2 points you made. Mr. Ikeoba, one of the points that Mr. Willie made was the fact that he was using the analogy of a father who should watch over his house. And he said that, look, if the child is misbehaving, you can either bring in the police to arrest the child and tame the child, or you can use the elders, the elders. And I just wanted to ask if you think that this particular issue, because we've seen government, we've seen operations like, I think it's Operation Python Dance that was, called the Exercise Egweke at some point. And, that really stirred controversy. People felt like, look, the Southeast was now looking like a war front. Is this an issue of reporting the child to the police, using security, or is this, an issue of the elders coming in? Is it a security, operation issue, or is it a dialogue issue?
It was supposed to be a dialogue issue. The government didn't do what it was supposed to do at that point in time before it unleashed that unwarranted violence. As far as we are concerned, what happened that time was unnecessary because there were no measures put in place to, first and foremost, interface and interact with these people, with these agitators. They are your citizens, for Christ's sake. So the first responsibility of a responsible government is to engage your citizens in a dialogue. Sit down with those people behind the agitation. This thing happens all over the world. You sit down, ask it, it's after you must have exhausted that platform for negotiation, for dialogue, for interaction. And you are convinced that as a government, you have done what you are supposed to do, and these people insist in towing the same, maybe violent path. This is when it will now make sense for you as a government, because nobody is saying that a government should abandon its responsibilities. There is only one government at a time. Nobody is saying the government should have ignored, they used to do whatever they were doing. But you didn't initiate. I just made reference to former President Yar'Adua and what he did, and we saw the impact. And the senior friend there that spoke made mention of politicization. He said this thing should not be politicized. We should separate politics from these issues. And when you separate politics, petty politics for Christ's sake, because what you see sometimes is petty politics, and they abandon the things, and that is why I am in government now. We must take responsibility. We must come up with policies and programs. We must bring ideas to the table, sit down with the people, all the parties that are involved, dialogue and come up with something fruitful. The government must lead the way. So I do not want us, because sometimes people will be saying one thing, and when you find yourself in power, you forget the things you had been saying and begin to say a different thing. So we must take responsibility. We must advise ourselves and say, this is the right process, this is the right strategy, this is the right idea to bring forward to see, if we could provide solution to these challenges, not just saying, father, maybe flog your son or do this. And no, have you done as a father? Have you done what you were supposed to do?
And I want to stay on that, as a father, if they've done what they're supposed to do, because he referred to the governors, as Mr. Willie referred to the governors as the father who should have handled this particular issue and not the federal government. Do you think that the governors, and I know you do not want to lay blame, but I'm just asking you, because most of the governors in the Southeast are relatively new, apart from the governor of Imo State and then the governor of Anambra State, who is also relatively new, by the way. Do you think that, previous governors did, much to particularly address these issues and dialogue with all actors?
In all sincerity, and without making reference to any particular government, I am convinced that they've not done enough. They've not at all. They've not done what they should have done. And this is the time to do it. And we also shouldn't excuse the federal government from it. It's a two-way thing. And because security, to a great extent, is in the hands of the federal government. And that is why there is also, when it comes to security, provision of security in that area from a particular perspective, we are not taking the governors away from it. The federal government, so it's a two-way thing. You put them together. Both the federal and the state government have not done what they are supposed to, or what they were supposed to have done by now. So we expect the governors of the Southeast, I agree, in my opinion, they should actually lead the way before we begin to talk about federal government. All I'm saying is that we shouldn't disconnect federal government from it. The governors have not done well at all. And this is the time when they must come together, sit down, bring ideas, identify the actors, the leaders behind, and sit down with them and interact with them. You don't just dismiss them and think, if not, this will just be like a guerrilla warfare. You will fight it till eternity and peace will not be restored. So nobody is trying to endorse any kind of agitation, any kind of secessionist movement or whatever. No. It's not even in the interest of anyone. So what we are saying is that government must first do what you are supposed to do. That is the most important thing. Then before you begin to blame anybody for disobedience. Not when you've not done what you are supposed to do and you're saying you're blaming the youth or blaming those agitating for whatever.
I want to go to Mr. Willie in just a moment, but Mr. Ekeba, let me stay with you because you said something that about secessionist movement is not in the interest of anyone. Are you saying that, your governor is not in support of and that's Governor Alex Otti, is not in support of the secessionist movement? And then, is it also a general idea in the Southeast that, look, this is what, because the idea that some people have is that the Southeast is the one asking for the secessionist, is the one pursuing the secessionist movement. Is it the general idea of everyone in the Southeast that, look, we want our own country?
The Southeast has leadership. We have governors now. We have leaders. We have traditional rulers. We have traditional institutions. We have the Ohanes Indigo and all the rest of them. And I'm not aware anybody has come out to tell you this is what we want as far as that issue is concerned. What we have always continued to ask for is responsible leadership, responsible governance, inclusive leadership, inclusion, real inclusion in the country. That has always been the issue. And even the people that are agitating, because we must get this thing right so that we don't paint the Southeast as people who are agitating for secession. No, there's nothing like that. And that is why when you look at it, it's the anger that's spilled over anger that has taken a dangerous dimension, a dimension of agitation. That is what it is. So we are not interested. I am not telling you what my governor has said or whatever, but of course I know the position he will take will be what will be in the best interest of the people. And like I said, I have never heard any governor, I have never seen any leader of Ohanes Indigo tell you the Southeast doesn't want to be part of Nigeria. But what people keep telling you is that when people are not needed by the way they are being treated, they will be left with no option than to ask for what they feel might grant them what they desire.
All right, let me bring in Mr. Willie. Mr. Willie, how would you assess, all efforts to address this issue in terms of, security operations? I mentioned earlier the issue of Operation Python Dance. We saw the attempt by I think this was Southeast governors who wanted to have the Southeast security network. I think it was Ebubeagu or so that also did not, seem not to have, kicked off. But how would you assess all of that attempt to address this issue?
Every government should expect insurrection and subjugation. So you don't expect that you come to rule and nobody will complain, there will be no crisis. And then for the fact that you've come to rule as the existing government of the day, and any of these issues come up, and you try it once, and then you should go away and relax. So far, there have not been much successes in efforts of some of the past state governors and governments in trying to see that the issue of insurgencies and the others are brought to an end. Most of them have not tried to the expected level. Many have not even tried at all. And so that is why my own take is this, that it's not just about saying it, but doing it. Okay, let's talk about at the present situation now. That how can the state government be proactive? One is about issue of intelligence. When this intelligence are given, how does government make use of this intelligence? Now, before the issue of Enugu, that children were coddled by some persons and flogged and all that, intelligence was given to the right channel. What actions were taken by the government agencies in place? Okay, what about the issue of firing at Abakaliki? Information was given. I remember about when the market women and men ran away, information was given. That intelligence, what was made out of it? So you see that there was no proactiveness in this information management. And the another thing about is about managing this information. You could see that when something happens here, and this information is given to government, and then some other stakeholders are hearing about it, and then they re-strategize. So far, I am to conclude here that the state government or the federal government needs to do more. See,
I want to go on, Mr. Willie, I want to go on a break in just a minute, and I want you to answer this because, some people have talked about the fact that the government at some point was using military. Yes, these operations are around the country. We've seen Crocodile Smile, Operation Wellstroke. There are different operations by the military. But Operation Python Dance, there was a round 1, 2, I think there was also round 3. And people said, look, the Southeast was looking like a war front. There was, controversy around that operation. Do you think that military should have gone in or that the police should have been equipped to do that job? What's your assessment of that?
The action or actions that took place at these very instances were not very correct because, like I said earlier on, that government should be seen as a calming agent. And so putting the right peg in the right hole shouldn't have invited the use of military forces. Police is there to make peace. If negotiation by the government agencies in place couldn't work, police could come in to negotiate. Yes, police does that. So it is the army and the military forces, they have their purpose. Why a particular country has this in place? It is not to fight the citizen. It is not to go or condescend too low to a brother and brother is fighting, or neighbors and neighbors and fight and bring military to kill them. They have their international and boundaries set up where they're supposed to face. So it is a duty of the police to have gone into because they are peacemakers. That is what is designed. The core assignment of the police. So for the fact that government or federal government use the armed forces to thrash or to settle that issue, I don't think it was about settlement. That was why I said that use of politics and combining it with the reality on ground, it is a failed government. So if we want to go ahead, move ahead, we want to make the masses to feel the impact of government in place. Let's divide politics with reality. The reality means that when there are conflicts, there are so many ways to resolve conflict. Negotiation is one of the best key ways that has always been used and has always succeeded. It is where negotiations fail, we use some other approaches. So using of the military might to have made those attempts was actually in error by the government.
I will come back and talk about that negotiation in a few minutes, but let's take a break. When we return, we'll continue our conversation on security in the Southeast. Stay with us.